Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm John Quincy, the chair of the committee, and joined by Council Vice President Glidden, Council members Johnson and Yang, and we're expecting others to join us in a few moments. We'll begin, of course. We've got, some 31 items on our agenda. The final item will be a discussion item on the Comcast cable franchise agreement and a transfer. The first item on our consent agenda is from the City Attorney's Office. These are a couple of legal settlements and outlined there for you. The second item is the President's executive action on immigration. This authorizes the City of Minneapolis to join as a friend of the court amicus brief comment submission. And item number 3 is the authorizing the agreement with the state of Minnesota for Minnesota Court Data Services. The fourth item comes from the Community Planning and Economic Development Department. This is acceptance of a certified local government grant award from the State Historic Preservation Office of the Minnesota Historical Society. The fifth item is from our Finance Property Services Department. These are the appointments from the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee from various ward appointments. This is in addition to the number of committee or council member assignments that were previously made. So this round outs the CLIC body with the exception of one outstanding appointment as well as several from the mayor's office. The sixth item is the 2014 fourth quarter gift acceptance. The parking lot lease amendment, a traffic maintenance building renovation project, authorizing execution of a contract amendment, and authorizing and executing an amendment number 1 to contract with Terra General Contractors for the Hiawatha Liquid AC Tank Project. The Mayor's Office brings forward item number 10, which is a Greater Twin Cities United Way grant. Let's accept a $5,000 grant from Twin Cities United Way for preparation and writing of the Cradle to Cave report. There's an Innovation Delivery Team grant that's also coming from the Mayor's Office. This is accepting, of course, the grant award from Bloomberg Philanthropies for $900,000 per year for 3 years. That is $2.7 million, and this is the establishment of the Innovation Delivery Team. This item will have a full discussion at the Committee of the Whole meeting on Wednesday. The 12th item is coming from CD and RS Committee. This is the 1026 Plymouth Avenue North Lot Beautification Project, accepting a grant from Hennepin County and or Ackerberg Group. The 13th item is the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development Redevelopment Grant Program and 2014 Emergency Solutions Grant Services Funding item. There's also the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency Funds and Rehab Support Program, as well as adopting a resolution increasing CPED residential finance appropriation by $51,000 and change for the home program income. There's also an item related to the Humboldt Greenway Single Family Residential Housing Development Project and an item on the Hollywood Theater Project, accepting a legacy grant awarded by the Historical Society for the Hollywood Theater. From the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement, we have the amendment to contract with Tubman. This is a contract amendment for our youth violence prevention work, as well as an item executing a contract with the University of Minnesota for veterinarian services. We also have an item from accepting a $30,000 grant from the Joyce Foundation for the community engagement coordinator position and some project costs. We are also accepting a grant of $30,000 from the Target Foundation support for community engagement coordinator. Item number 23 is the database searches contract. And then from the Transportation and Public Works Committee, we have items number 24 related to the 24th Street East and Snelling Avenue Street Reconstruction Project, the Minnehaha Avenue Street Reconstruction Project, Wada Boulevard and Minnehaha Avenue Street Reconstruction Project, and authorizing issuance of requests for proposals for qualified consultants to conduct a survey of the Minneapolis water distribution system for leakages. We have a contract with University of Minnesota Board of Regents, extending the contract for a granulated activated carbon filter pilot project, and accepting a low bid from Concrete Idea for estimated expenditures for our construction of sidewalk, curb and gutter projects. From the executive committee, we also have the new appointed position, Director of Innovation Delivery Team. This is in conjunction with the Bloomberg Philanthropies project, and that comes from the executive committee establishing that new position. Are there any questions or comments from committee members on those 30 items on the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Yang, I missed that, sorry. What's your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a couple of comments on a couple items.
Sure.
For item number 2, I'm going to take it offline with our city attorney, so that's not an issue. But I want to make a general statement first. I see on the CD and RS referrals a lot of good things happening with housing, and I'm really appreciative of that. I wanted to comment on item number 12, which is 1026 Plymouth Avenue North. It sounds really cool, lot beautification, but let me just encourage my colleagues to support this. And I say that just because this lot has been empty for about 30 some odd years. I mean, it's been very empty. I think that the city has, I will kindly say we've neglected the parcel for quite a long time. It's a pretty valuable parcel, I think, relative to just where it's located. And, just recently, Hennepin County built their hub right across the street from there. And so what happened was Hennepin County and the neighborhood group NERC, they engaged in this community benefits agreement for this lot. And in some ways, it was really strange because they didn't own it. We did. We weren't a part of their community benefits agreement, but somehow they had this agreement with regards to our lot. And, the lot has been sitting there for a long time. It used to, a number of people have said different things, but it used to be maybe a gas station or some sort of industrial usage was there, and at some point it has sat there, and at this point there's some asphalt on there. We've done some estimates on how much it would cost, and somehow Tree Trust came in, and I imagine they will be the vendor that we will select to do this beautification project. And what they're offering is substantially less than what estimate we got earlier. And I want to thank our CPED staff for doing really wonderful work in terms of making this work. Beth Grossen is in the audience here. Jimmy Lloyd was through this the whole time as well. And it is a good thing that we will at some point clean this up. Hopefully we'll continue to push to clean up this lot completely and maybe be able to develop something on the lot. But $17,000 and change is a good expenditure to take care of this. And I just want to tell my colleagues as well that this money is coming from Hennepin County, I believe, and the money with this community benefits agreement, their agreement has about $100,000 into this lot for improvements, including this type of improvement, but other improvements could include bus shelters and other things like that. And so, it's a good thing. Hopefully we will figure out some way of developing this lot so that it will be more useful than what it's been so far. I think, sometimes, there needs to be, public opinion or community support or, community outrage for us to move fast enough with regards to something like this. And, maybe this will be a good start for us to find some good usage for this lot because it's a great lot. Okay, so thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for the comment. Appreciate all the work that our partners, whether it's the county, our nonprofit developers, for-profit developers that help make these things happen, especially with neighborhood support. So thanks for bringing that and making those comments. Are there any other questions on the consent item agenda?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if there's anyone who can answer or speak to item number 30 with regards to newly appointed position of Director of Innovation for Delivery Team, but I'd love to hear a bit of what the thinking is with regards to that, and yeah.
Sure. This item is something that came from the executive committee, so there was some conversation about this. This establishes the position for Director of Innovation Delivery Team. It was addressed as part of the process of accepting the Bloomberg. So it's a little out of sequence of our normal procedures about doing a request, submitting a application, receiving funds, and then creating a position. So it's a little out of our regular order. I don't know if Council Vice President Glidden, if you'd want to comment on the executive committee's action. But I also wanted to point out that the more robust conversation about how the Bloomberg funds will be used will be taken up in Committee of the Whole on Wednesday.
Right, thank you. Councilmember Quincy, I'll just maybe give a little snapshot of our discussion at Committee of the Whole. We did have some questions about the position that was being created to understand timeline issues and other related items. Our understanding from that presentation was that the conditions of the grant are that the director position must be on board or an offer given by a certain date, which is the end of February. I can't remember the exact date, but the end of February. And due to our council calendar, this meant that the position had to go through executive prior to having a more general overview and acceptance of the grant itself. Which is happening through this committee with a more detailed presentation planned at Committee of the Whole. Council President Johnson was there at the executive committee as well, even though she's not going to be here at the Committee of the Whole, and she and I have talked about this extensively. I think the one piece that was had not happened as part of the process was that traditionally we will see come through committee process a council approval of the actual grant submission. And I think that was just frankly an oversight, and we've talked about that with staff. But everything else is coming through as really required by the grant conditions.
Does that address your question, Councilmember Yang?
A bit. I'll follow up on it.
Look forward on Wednesday. Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor of the items previously outlined here, the 30 items on the consent agenda, all of those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Note items carry. Also, just want to point out, we've joined by Councilmember Palmisano and Bender to the committee. And I think we're ready to move to our next and final item on the agenda, which is the Comcast transfer, and we have Matt Lively here to make the introduction, and we'll be hearing from several speakers, I imagine.
Thank you, Chair Quincy, members of the committee. I am Matt Lively, Interim Director in the Communications Department, and in just a minute I'll introduce Mike Bradley, who will be doing today's presentation. Mike is with the firm Bradley, Hagen, and Gullickson. Of course, Peter Ginder from the City Attorney's Office is also here, and he's worked closely on this, so he is available for questions as well. First, I'll just briefly set the stage on what we're asking from the committee today. As many of you know, Comcast Cable has a cable franchise agreement with the city that runs through 2021. Comcast Cable is currently taking steps to acquire Time Warner Cable. And as part of that transaction, Comcast is proposing to divest several million subscribers and move these customers to a new cable company, which will be called Greatland Connections. The Twin Cities is one of those affected markets, and Comcast has formally requested that the city transfer its franchise to Greatland Connections. Mike Bradley, in coordination with the City Attorney's Office, has done an extensive review of the transfer application, and today we're asking the committee to approve the transfer. In addition to a transfer resolution, We're also asking for approval of a settlement agreement that we've negotiated with Comcast that resolves some outstanding issues with the current franchise. So Mike will give you more details on both of these, and I would like to introduce Mike Bradley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lively. Mr. Bradley, welcome.
Thank you, Councilmember Quincy and members. It's a real pleasure to be in front of you again. My name is Mike Bradley. I'm with the law firm of Bradley, Hagan, and Gullickson. I thought what I could do first for your benefit and maybe for that of the public is to just briefly go over the franchising background that we have with Comcast today. So right now we're in the middle of a franchise agreement with Comcast that was entered into in 2009. And that also resulted from a settlement agreement that was actually entered into in 2006. So sometimes you'll hear about the 2006 settlement and a 2009 franchise agreement. But those are the main documents. So the cable franchise is what gives Comcast the authority to use the public rights of way throughout the city in order to provide benefits, cable services to city residents. Without a cable franchise, a cable operator cannot provide cable service to city residents. So it's an important document for the city. It's an important document for the cable operators. Comcast, through its predecessors and interests that go back, you'll remember maybe to Time Warner Cable, to Paragon, and to Rogers, if you go way back, has held a franchise here since 1983. And they have been the only franchise cable operator since that time. But it's important, I think, for the public to know, and just kind of as a reminder to you, that these franchises are non-exclusive. And so other operators can come to the city and request a cable franchise. And in fact, that has just recently happened where we got the city has received an application for a cable franchise from a company just recently. As Matt said, this cable franchise with Comcast is scheduled to terminate in 2021. So we have a term that goes through 2021. Part of the franchise covers transfers, as does state law and as does federal law. And the franchise gives the city the opportunity to review and approve any transfer of ownership that is requested. As I mentioned, there was a 2006 settlement agreement that resolved some very long-standing disagreements between the cable operator and the city. Many of those provisions in that settlement agreement then carried over into the 2009 cable franchise. Since the franchise was issued or renewed in 2009 to Comcast, city staff had identified a few areas of disagreement or noncompliance with Comcast. For example, the PEG funding obligation, a franchise fee obligation, and they also.
Excuse me, I just wondered if you, for the folks who don't understand what PEG means, if you could just kind of.
Excellent.
The acronym.
Yes. PEG stands for Public Educational and Governmental Access Television. So, for example, if you're watching today on Channel 79 here in the city, that's a governmental access channel. And the franchise are referred to as access channels. But thank you for that. Yes. So there were some issues identified where we had some disagreements with Comcast, going back a few years. So as was mentioned previously, Comcast has asked for the city to approve a franchise transfer from Comcast to a new company that will be called Great Land Connections. And I just thought I'd give you a little bit more background on why that's happening. Comcast has entered into a series of agreements to acquire Time Warner Cable. And Time Warner Cable has about 11.5 million subscribers, and they'll be acquiring those subscribers. In addition to that, they've agreed with Charter Communications to sell a certain number of cable systems that involve about 1.4 million subscribers. So they'll be selling those systems to Charter. They'll also be swapping some cable systems with Charter, and that represents another 1.5 to 1.6 million subscribers to the two companies. The piece that really affects the city, however, is the third piece, and that is Comcast is spinning off 2.5 million subscribers to a new company. It was initially called SpinCo, and then it was changed to Midwest Cable, and I think the important name for all of us to remember today is probably Great Land Connections. Great Land Connections will be the proposed new cable operator, and if we approve the transfer and certain events happen, Great Land Connections would be the new franchise cable holder with the city of Minneapolis. Just to give you a little bit of background on what Great Land Connections will look like if the transaction closes. The new company will have 2.5 million subscribers. They'll have about $4.9 billion in revenue. They'll be using Charter Communications to manage a lot of their operations, and with Charter we'll be co-branding their voice, video, and data service as Spectrum. And so they'll be able to offer triple play similar to what Comcast does today. They have over 200 HD television channels. They have video on demand. Again, all very similar to services that are provided by Comcast through Xfinity today. As I mentioned, the company will be managed by Charter, and Charter will either own or manage the majority of the cable systems, or at least cover the majority area of the state of Minnesota as a result of that. One other piece of information that may interest the council and the public is that Great Land will continue to offer the Internet Essentials program, which is a program designed to provide internet services to lower income individuals. Great Land will end up serving several metropolitan areas, including the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, but also the Detroit area, Indianapolis, among about 25 other markets overall. So we have the transfer application. I just wanted to give you kind of that kind of overall background of what Midwest or Great Land Connections is going to ultimately look like if the transfer is approved and everything closes as planned by Comcast and Great Land. The city has what I would say is a fairly limited review of the transfer, and it's very kind of locally oriented. And the city reviews the transfer applications to see if the new proposed franchisee is legally qualified, technically qualified, and financially qualified. They also look at whether the existing franchise holder is in current compliance with the cable franchise. Some of the kind of the larger issues as to whether a transaction involving major cable operators is good public policy or legal. Some of those issues are decided then at the FCC and the DOJ. So there's still a series of federal approvals that Comcast and Great Land need to receive before the transaction can close. So you can see there's a convergence of issues here with compliance and the transfer application. And so our cable franchising team, which is indicated here on the slide, got together, started reviewing compliance, reviewing the transfer application, and ultimately we entered into discussions with Comcast to address all of these various issues, and we were pleased that we were able to reach a settlement agreement with them that addresses not only the compliance issues but also addresses recommending approval, conditional approval of the cable franchise transfer. I thought I'd give you hopefully a brief summary of the key terms of the settlement agreement. The first is the provision of HD channels. Now, currently Comcast has the opportunity, or had the opportunity, to provide HD channels to the city, and these are for the PEG access, or the Public Educational and Governmental Access channels. Under the existing franchise and settlement agreement, Comcast, if they did provide HD channels, could then also reduce the total number of channels that the city has, and the city has 9 PEG channels. Under the settlement agreement, Comcast will provide 3 HD channels over a period of about 3 years, and there'll be no reduction of channels going forward. So that's a nice opportunity for the city to start providing their access channels in a standard that more and more people are going to, and that's high definition. Comcast will also be providing video on demand server space for city programming. And if any of you are familiar with how Comcast provides video on demand service to its subscribers, basically it's kind of a menu driven function where you can choose the on demand button on your TV, and you'll have a series of pre-recorded programming that subscribers can access, and now they'll be able to access a certain amount of city programming. So at first we'll get 10 hours of video on demand storage space on Comcast servers. That can be increased to 20 hours, assuming that we're getting a certain amount of views, so that our programming is getting some viewership from the Comcast subscribers. It also, as I noted on the slide, it eliminates a prior video on demand provision in the settlement agreement and the franchise agreement that allowed Comcast to provide video on demand at their discretion, and if they did provide it, they could reduce a certain number of PEG channels. That language has all been eliminated. If you look through your menu guides when you're on Comcast's system right now, and you go to, for example, channel 79, and you'll want to see what's on channel 79 through their menu and kind of TV guide types of services, you'll see it'll probably say government access, and it'll be 24 hours government access. Comcast has agreed to provide the ability of the city to provide programming information so that subscribers will be able to see that Ways and Means, for example, is on from 1:30 to, let's say, 3:30 on Monday. And they'll be able to provide all that programming information for all of their channels. And Comcast has agreed to pay for that, which is a very nice benefit. Comcast will also continue to provide public service announcements. This is something that had been negotiated informally between the communications department and Comcast, and it has had a significant value. And I think if the city were left to try to pay for that type of insertion into Comcast programming, it probably the city probably would have had to have paid $100,000 or more for that type of access. So it's had a lot of value to the city over time. We were concerned as staff that we would lose that ability to provide those PSA announcements in the future, and so we went ahead and got those PSA commitments in writing, so that going forward, if there is a new cable operator, that they'll continue to provide those public service announcements. The city also did a franchise fee review that was submitted was sometime last year, and it showed that there was a small, what I would consider a small underpayment of franchise fees. And Comcast has agreed to pay that underpayment in full. It's just over $40,000 that will go to the general fund. Comcast will also provide complimentary cable service to 30 different municipal buildings throughout the city. That includes City Hall and most of the police and fire stations in the city. and a few other buildings. Each building will be eligible to receive 3 free boxes, and the city will also receive an additional 40 boxes to use as they see fit. Comcast will also continue to provide cable service to the schools and libraries throughout the city. There'll be a new connection for the Minneapolis Telecommunications Network. If you're not familiar with MTN, I think most of you are. MTN is the designated access provider, public access provider for the city. They have indicated that they're moving, but they needed a connection because wherever they go, they need to be able to send programming either to City Hall or to Comcast so that their programming can be broadcast or cablecast to the residents of the city. Comcast has agreed to make that connection for MTN, which is a value of about $16,000 for MTN. PEG funding will change a little bit as a result of the settlement agreement. There was some disagreements in the past on how the PEG fee was calculated in the past. In the settlement agreement and current franchise, there was some triggering language for increases in the PEG fee. So for example, it would increase from 50 cents to $1, for example, if a penetration level was at a certain level in the city. Well, there was disagreement between Comcast and city staff as to how to calculate that penetration rate. This settlement agreement resolves that past dispute. It eliminates that particular trigger. There will be no triggers going forward with PEG funding in the city. The PEG fee will be increased to $1.50 starting now going through the end of the franchise term. There'll be a CPI index increase over time, but in no event can the PEG fee go above $1.75. But that'll be a significant benefit to the city for funding access television going forward. We're recommending conditional consent to the cable franchise transfer from Comcast to Midwest Cable or Great Land Connections. There are going to be several contingencies. The transfer has to receive federal approvals, as I mentioned. There's also certain guarantees that Midwest Cable has to make to the city, including a performance guarantee and a rate guarantee. And there have been some issues raised concerning the financial qualifications of Midwest Cable or Great Land Connections. We think that the terms of the settlement agreement and the terms of the transfer resolution really address those issues, at least to our satisfaction. We think that that the financial qualifications of a company that's going to have 2.5 million subscribers and $4.5 billion in revenue, we think that this company appears to be financially qualified to do business in the city. And the final piece of the settlement agreement was that all of the professional fees for outside counsel were paid for, which is also a nice benefit to the city. So there's going to be really 3 things that happen. We're going to do 2, we're recommending 2 today. One future action will be to do a franchise ordinance amendment, and that will basically amend the franchise that we have with Comcast to incorporate all of the benefits of the settlement agreement into the cable franchise. But today we're recommending approval of the settlement agreement. That settlement agreement with Exhibit B has a copy of the transfer resolution as well. So we're recommending approval of the settlement agreement, number 1, and then number 2, approval of the conditional transfer resolution. And then, like I said, the ordinance amending the cable franchise will be for a future action. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bradley. I have questions from Councilmember Yang, followed by Councilmember Johnson.
Mr. Bradley, I'm going to ask a dumb question first. So in this situation, you are our attorney, right?
That's right. Yes, council member. Yes,
Okay.
I've been representing the city on cable franchising matters as outside counsel and working with Mr. Ginder for over 12 years now.
Okay, and just for both you and Mr. Gender, so you had presented the review of state and federal law, and I'm just wondering, I mean, is this a quasi judicial proceeding at this point, or is it not?
This, as I understand it, we're talking about adopting a resolution,
Okay.
and that becomes a legislative issue. It's not a quasi judicial.
I think that's right.
And this is, as we know, is not a public hearing
Right.
because it has nothing to do with the ordinance per se. This is just setting up the transfer agreement and the and the resolution.
Okay, and could I
Yeah,
have
please.
just one follow-up question? With this review and this transfer, it's almost kind of like, I mean, there's a difference between now and let's say 2021 when the franchise agreement is over and we're opening it up for potential bidders and all that stuff. But I guess my question is, I mean, why wouldn't now be a good time to open it up?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that, Councilmember Quincy and Councilmember Yang. This cable franchise that we have, that the city has with Comcast, is a non-exclusive franchise. So when the franchise expires with Comcast, we'll be looking at whether or not we should renew that franchise or not. We won't be putting it out for bid, for example, which is a little bit different maybe than a lot of other types of issues. But a cable company that wants to provide cable service in the city of Minneapolis can approach the city at any time and ask to provide cable service in this area. So, and for example, that just recently happened. The city just received an application for a cable franchise from a company. It just so happens that the city has never had a second entrant into this market. It may in the future, but it doesn't right now. So I'm hoping that answers your question.
I think it does. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm encouraged to see, I know you mentioned CenturyLink looking at a franchise, and I know we have now some folks that are stepping up competition as well in terms of internet service. So I'm encouraged to see the competition hopefully driving both investment and improvements and lower costs as well for our residents. But I seem to remember when I once had Time Warner cable and it was switched over to Comcast due to, I believe, a franchise transfer, my prices went up quite a bit. And so I'm wondering if we have any guarantees or sense of what might happen for all of our residents out there in terms of their cable and internet service and whether they might be affected by price changes or changes to the quality of their service.
Thank you, Councilmember Quincy and Councilmember Johnson. Very legitimate concern about rates for your subscribers here in the city. I think we've done the best that we can under applicable law to protect the subscribers of the city. We have a rate guarantee that will be executed by Midwest Cable if we conditionally approve this transfer. The guarantee basically indicates that cable rates will not go up as a result of the transfer. We don't have authority, unfortunately, to put rate freezes in, for example, and things of that nature. So to say that there will be no rate increases going forward would not be correct. I'm sure there will be rate increases going forward, just as there have been for the last 30 years. But we did address that issue with Comcast in the proposed resolution. It's a very good question.
Thank you.
Further questions? No? Good. Thank you very much. I had just a quick one. Looks like we're approving a conditional transfer resolution. Can you illuminate what conditional means to us as in terms of what happens if the Time Warner deal doesn't go through?
Sure. So if this transaction does not close, the conditional transfer resolution will become null and void. And so it's entirely possible that, we go through this process and for whatever reason the transaction doesn't close, then the resolution becomes null and void and Comcast remains our franchised cable operator. The terms of the settlement agreement, however, continue going forward with the city.
That was an important distinction to make because the settlement and the transfer are separate.
Correct.
In terms of the conditional transfer resolution.
Correct.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bradley, for the presentation, for the detail. I know you've taken the opportunity to brief people along the way because it's a very complex issue. And certainly for helping lead, especially with the City Attorney's Office and communications, getting the best deal that we thought we could for our City of Minneapolis and our residents. I think this particular settlement agreement is a great gesture on both our parties' parts. I think it clarifies a lot of the things that were left over from the previous franchise agreement. I also think it really provides a number of enhancements. So for those enhancements and for that clarification, appreciate your work on that effort.
Thank you, Councilmember.
I realized, of course, I commented earlier, this is not a public hearing, but if anybody from Comcast would care to make a remark, happy to have you address anything. If you had any further questions that council members would be able to ask and would be more appropriate for you. I'm very pleased to see Mr. Coleman at the podium because you know what I'm going to ask you.
I do, so let me
cut you off.
Mr. Chairman. I'm Emmett Coleman, Vice President of Government Regulatory Affairs for Comcast in the Twin Cities region. Before I say anything else, I was reminded in the hallway that I probably spend more time these days in Minneapolis than I do in St. Paul. So as much as it sometimes kills my brother, gotta love Minneapolis, right? So I'm happy to be here today. And
so Minneapolis
thank you.
is your favorite city in Minnesota?
Today Minneapolis is my favorite city. It's always actually one of my favorite places. That's why I moved back home. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Mr. Bradley, to the Communications Office, and to Mr. Ginder for working cooperatively with us. Obviously, thank all of you members of the council and the city leadership for working through the process with us. We know that it's confusing. I'm always happy to be of any help and answer any questions that we can as we go through this process. And of course, it is still contingent on federal approvals, but should we get to that point, then obviously we'd look forward to having more conversations with you about how we can not only help the city, but help your constituents and our customers in the city kind of go through the transition as smoothly as possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coleman. Not seeing any questions or comments, I'd just like to move this item and the two actions appropriate for that, including the approval of the settlement agreement, as well as the approval of the resolution on the conditional transfer. All those in favor of those items, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed. That item carries and will be forwarded to our city council meeting on Friday. So thank you very much. Seeing no further business before this committee, we are adjourned.